think this debate is exactly, for me, the legacy of Jo. You know, this is about the legacy of Jo Cox, and every single one of us here has mentioned a memory, a sparkle of Jo. I think I just wanted to say, first of all, put my thanks to Jo's sister, our friend and member for Spen Valley, for her incredibly thoughtful contribution and strength and courage that she had to deliver that. But also I'd like to just pay a note to the Minister who opened the debate also. I felt the way in which she set the tone gave us the ability to say what we wanted to say about Jo. I also want to put my thanks on record to Jo for her dedicated work on strengthening communities and advocating that everyone needed to be treated with respect, and that's so much of what we've heard about today. In her honour, I particularly want to talk about loneliness in our communities and why she was such an avid champion of targeting that, but also hopefully provide that level of hope and that layer of hope that Jo, I think, brought to the sparkle of Westminster. But before I do, a lot has been said about the members of Parliament who arrived at the same time as Jo, but not a lot of us have talked about the impact it had on our wider Labour family. I was a member of South Leicestershire Labour Party at the time, and I'd been the 2015 general election candidate for South Leicestershire. And we, like so many, were just truly saddened but shocked by Jo's death. It was so difficult, we just couldn't fathom it could have happened. It was just beyond belief. In a true South Leicestershire CLP tradition, a decision was made to honour Jo with a permanent tribute. And we have a plaque and an acer tree planted in Mossdale Meadows, a lovely part of South Leicestershire, to allow us to remember Jo. And it, of course, bears her most famous quote from her maiden speech. I wanted to pay particular thanks to some of my members of the CLP because it was out of that confusion of what had happened, action sprung into place, as it often does with the people that we know and trust every day. So I want to say thank you to Sandra Parkinson, Lord Willie Back from the other place, Caroline Back, the leader of Braunston Town Council, Councillor Nick Brown, and the late Councillor David Gear for their work to get this tribute to Jo firmly in place in Leicestershire. The plaque was our way of remembering Jo, but also the unveiling coincided with our get-together event, the place we brought our community together, where we make sure people are okay. And I have to admit, when I need a little bit of solitude, a bit of silence, I just make my way to the plaque. It's a really lovely space. Jo Cox herself famously said, "I want not live in a country where thousands of people are living lonely lives forgotten by the rest of us." And I share that sentiment. I've been door knocking fairly regularly throughout most of my adult life, but the post-pandemic feeling on the doorsteps was something I just hadn't experienced before. More people than ever wanted me to come into their homes to chat. It was a really unusual experience. They were super lonely. They'd felt isolation much more than they'd realised. And looking at the data, the information, it doesn't really feel like a surprise. Roughly 7% of adults in England reported feeling lonely, often or always, and that remains relatively high post-pandemic. On top of that, adults living with a disability are twice as likely to experience persistent loneliness. But obviously those groups we often forget. New mothers often feel incredibly lonely. Those whose gender identity differs from their sex-registered birth are 3 times more likely to feel lonely. And loneliness is also disproportionately high amongst the long-term unemployed and who are financially struggling, which is why you have to give people hope. We have to make sure that we are tackling some of the core issues in our society. At an age where Jo's statement of "we have more in common than that which divides us" is more important a reminder than ever. And it's not a huge leap to say that loneliness is partly to blame for the division and anger we see today, that isolation triggers people. As the Jo Cox Foundation reminds us, loneliness is linked to lower trust, reduced civic participation, and increased feelings of exclusion, which weakens community cohesion and increases vulnerability and polarisation. So how can we look as communities to look out for one another? How can we promote community cohesion? And how can we tackle loneliness? Just on Saturday, I went to an inspirational event, Woodstock in Whitwick, in my constituency at their annual cheque giving event. Social inclusion is their main focus. They run exclusively by volunteers, focused on giving back to their community. Alongside hosting their main annual fundraiser, Woodstock, a community music festival, they hold events, one such as Bingo Buddies, on the last Friday of every month, which is a free bingo session for older people with raffle, teas and cakes. For so many, sadly, it's the only time they get out of the house, and it's just such an important space to socialise. Our communities are the ability to unlock the answers to some of these questions. Our communities are championing each other all the time. Woodstock and Whitwick actively look at ways to help others, raising money throughout the year to give those to most in need in my community. For those they've helped who've lost their battle, to cancer or to other trauma, they send a hamper to the family, a little reminder that they're not alone, that they have their whole community behind them. Since 2002, they've donated more than £150,000 to individual families and community groups. And most recently, they've donated to Loris, Bright Hope, and Leicester Royal ICU Garden, and so much more. The impact that they've had on our local community is profound and something we need so much more of. And I hope, just by my short speech, we'll understand that Jo's legacy is not just about the sadness that we feel, the grief that we've shared today, but it's also about hope and the opportunity to carry Jo's legacy forward. We can continue to collectively create a better society and be a bit more like Jo. Yeah.